I'm delighted to convene the first Oversight Investigation Subcommittee hearing for the 115th Congress. Before I turn to the topic of today's hearing and introduce our witnesses, I want to welcome our new ranking member and the others who are joining the subcommittee for the first time who will be coming shortly, we are sure. In recent years, this subcommittee has been engaged in a wide variety of important national security topics. I'm eager to work with all of you to ensure we continue to exercise our constitutional responsibilities to help to oversee the Department of Defense. I'm happy to have Mr. Moulton as the subcommittee's ranking member, and I look forward to his important contributions to our work. I'm also pleased that we are joined this year by Mr. Gates, Mr. Banks, Ms. Cheney, Mr. O'Halloran, and Mr. Swazi. They are new to this committee, and our returning members are Mr. Conaway and Mr. Scott. So I look forward to their keen insights. Now, for today's hearing, we are also joined by, or probably will be joined by, one or more committee members who are not members of the subcommittee. And for any members of the full committee who are not permanent members of the subcommittee who are or will be attending, I ask unanimous consent that they be permitted to participate in this hearing with the understanding that all sitting subcommittee members will be recognized for questions prior to those not assigned to the subcommittee. Without objection, so ordered. Today's hearing topic is especially timely. 3 weeks ago, the Department of Defense Inspector General released a report about allegations that leadership within U.S. Central Command improperly manipulated intelligence products that led to an inaccurate understanding of the U.S. campaign against ISIS. As a consequence, 30 professionals in the Inspector General's office undertook an inquiry into this matter. They conducted 152 interviews at CENTCOM and reviewed thousands of pages of materials over the course of many months. Although the report did not find systemic or intentional distortion of intelligence or evidence of misconduct, the IGD did conclude that CENTCOM intelligence products could have and should have been better. The report also found a very challenging command climate at CENTCOM and identified several process and procedural issues which the IG believed impeded the intelligence analysis process. The Inspector General proffered 29 specific recommendations for improvements and discussed the need to implement corrective action. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and learning about the changes that have been made in response to the report and the progress we can expect. I look forward to discussing these issues with the two panels today. Before I introduce our first witness, I turn to the Oversight Investigation Subcommittee ranking member for any open remarks that he would like to make.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hartzler. It's an honor to be here, and I very much look forward to our work together. So thank you so much for welcoming me. And I'd like to just take a quick moment to also recognize a couple new Democratic members on the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, Tom O'Halloran of Arizona and Tom Swazi of New York. So we're bringing you two Toms in addition to myself. I came to Washington promising to work across the aisle and to make sure that we in Congress never flinch when it comes to asking the difficult questions about what it takes to ensure our national security. I believe we'll do an excellent job working together in that spirit and in the bipartisan tradition of this committee. In the United States, our policymakers and service members rely on intelligence analysis to make critical strategic, operational, and tactical decisions every day, some life or death. So it is imperative that we have adequate safeguards in place to ensure they receive objective, empirically based reporting on which is ground truth. For that reason, when allegations arose last year about manipulation of intelligence at United States Central Command, Congress encouraged the DOD Inspector General to conduct a thorough investigation and report back with recommendations. The Inspector General conducted an exhaustive investigation involving 152 interviews of 120 witnesses, reviews of millions of emails, 425,000 documents, and 140 finished intelligence products. In its final report, they did not find evidence that intelligence was falsified or intentionally distorted, or that intelligence processes resulted in false narrative or systemic distortion. However, the IG did find evidence of issues that are concerning to the committee. including some that the chairwoman already mentioned. These include a poor command climate, low morale, and ineffective communication and guidance that produced a perception among analysts that the integrity of the process was questionable. These findings demonstrate how it is paramount that we ensure the climate at CENTCOM is improved and that better safeguards are in place. I believe these are exactly the types of issues that require serious scrutiny from the Oversight Committee, and I'd like to thank the chairwoman again for her leadership and her interest in delving into this important topic today.
Thank you, Mr. Molden. Appreciate your comments. So I'm pleased to recognize the witness on our first panel, the Honorable Glenn Fine, Acting Inspector General for the Department of Defense. So thank you for being here today, and we welcome your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you today to discuss the investigation by the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General into allegations that senior officials at CENTCOM falsified, distorted, delayed, or suppressed intelligence products related to its efforts to degrade and destroy ISIL. These were very serious and troubling allegations, and we devoted significant resources to investigating them. We assembled a multidisciplinary team of more than 30 DOD OIG employees to handle the investigation. Our team did conduct over 150 interviews of 120 witnesses, both inside and outside of CENTCOM. We examined in detail the specific intelligence products that were raised by the complainants and witnesses. In addition, we collected and reviewed a massive amount of draft and final intelligence products and emails produced by CENTCOM. We also interviewed intelligence officials in the DOD and the intelligence community for their assessments of CENTCOM's intelligence products. We did not stop there. We conducted an analytical review of a random sample of 140 CENTCOM intelligence products to determine whether there were significant changes related to the edits of these products and whether such changes indicated any trend or pattern of distortion with regard to the portrayal of ISIS and the Iraqi security forces as stronger or weaker. We also interviewed witnesses about the command climate in CENTCOM's Intelligence Directorate, and we reviewed command climate surveys. Finally, we examined in detail the management processes for producing intelligence products in CENTCOM to determine if there are deficiencies or weaknesses in need of improvement. Our full findings and conclusions are contained in a 542-page classified report of investigation, which we have provided to this and other congressional committees. In addition, we prepared a 190-page unclassified report of investigation, which we publicly released. In short, our investigation did not substantiate the most serious allegation that intelligence was falsified. Similarly, we did not find systematic or intentional distortion of intelligence by CENTCOM senior leaders or that the leaders suppressed or delayed intelligence products. However, we did find a troubling and widespread perception among many intelligence analysts that their leaders were attempting to distort the intelligence products. We also identified specific weaknesses and flaws in the CENTCOM management processes for creating intelligence products. We believe these deficiencies, such as ineffective communication and guidance, lack of adequate feedback, uncertainty about various policies, and the ambiguous status of DIA analysts assigned to CENTCOM, hindered the effectiveness and efficiency of CENTCOM intelligence processes and affected the morale of the analytical workforce. We concluded that these practices related to intelligence products in CENTCOM could have and should have been better, and that further improvements can be made. We therefore made 29 recommendations that relate to the issues we investigated. Some of the most important recommendations are that CENTCOM should improve feedback, communication, and guidance between its leaders and the intelligence workforce. CENTCOM should update and maintain its standard operating procedures related to intelligence production. The relationship, reporting responsibilities, and intelligence requirements that apply to DIA analysts should be detailed and clarified in writing, and CENTCOM leaders should require that intelligence products consider analysis of alternatives. We also recommended that senior leaders in the responsible organizations review the report with regard to the overall performance of the individuals described. We believe that all 29 recommendations are important and that they provide a useful roadmap for improving intelligence processes, not only in CENTCOM, but throughout other combatant commands in the DOD. We also note that many of our recommendations are consistent with what the House of Representatives Task Force recommended. We therefore urge the DOD, DIA, and CENTCOM to take these recommendations seriously and to fully implement corrective action in response to the recommendations, or to explain in detail why such corrective action is not necessary or warranted. We believe that such actions can further improve intelligence processes and reduce the risk that allegations such as the ones at issue in this report will arise in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our investigation with the subcommittee. That concludes my statements, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fine. I appreciate your very good work. This is the unclassified version, and then with another 500-page classified, you really have put a lot of effort into this. And there's a lot of things in here that we can learn from, and I guess that's my first question, because I've seen another instances of the excellent work that's done by the DOD IG or the cigar offices, but the story seems to never continue after the report is issued. So can you please tell me your responsibilities after you release your report, and is there anyone that ensures your recommendations are implemented?
Yes, we typically take follow-up action to inquire from the responsible organizations what they intend to do with regard to our recommendations. We want specific details about whether they agree or disagree and whether they can concur with the recommendations or whether they intend to implement other things to address the intent of the recommendations. We then follow up with them. We ask them for documents and verification that they have actually implemented those recommendations, and in many cases, we often go back and test to verify that they've actually done that. These are important recommendations. We intend to do that. We intend to follow up with them, and we intend to ensure that they take corrective action or explain why they don't intend to.
So is the follow-up actions, is that made public too?
Sometimes it is. It depends if we do a follow-up report. We do make public our follow-up actions. Often we provide in our semi-annual reports the status of unimplemented recommendations, so we do that as well. And sometimes, and we're happy to provide the committee with information on the status of those recommendations as time goes on as well.
That sounds good. So this report you issued was January 31st, 2017. Is that right?
Yes.
So when will you go back and check and see that they're following up on the recommendations? About what's the time frame?
We normally give them a little time. I'd say the average about 60 days or so for them to determine what they intend to do, and then we periodically follow up after that as well, at periodic time periods, depending on the recommendation itself.
So how has CENTCOM and other agencies responded to the report recommendations, and do you assess that they're willing or reluctant to pursue the changes that you suggest?
Well, when we issued the report, they indicated they thought it was a thorough report, and they thought that, particularly DIA, for example, said that this made useful recommendations, thoughtful recommendations. They have not responded specifically to each recommendations, and we want that, and we intend to follow up with them. But in general, the reaction has been generally positive, but the proof is in the pudding. We want to see exactly what they intend to do with regard to each specific recommendation.
Well, I think it's very important to pursue the follow-up, and I look forward to your continued look at this and what you find out. So turn to the ranking member. Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First of all, Mr. Fine, I share Chairwoman Hartzler's views of the quality of your report, the importance of it, and it gives us a lot of confidence to know that such good work is being done. I also share her concerns that the recommendations actually be implemented, and so that's very important. Sort of looking even further into the future, if there were here or elsewhere an active attempt to manipulate intelligence analysis sometime in the future, do we have adequate protections in place to guard against that from ever occurring?
I think we do. I think that there is the opportunity to make those complaints known, and that there are entities within the Department of Defense that will look into that, including us. As you saw, we took these allegations very seriously and conducted an exhaustive investigation. We do think that there can be additional actions that can be taken, including clarifying the relationship of the analysts at CENTCOM to DIA, improving the training and guidance and oversight, increasing standardized operating procedures, and also a recommendation to explain and identify the function of the ombudsperson who can be an outlet for these kinds of concerns if analysts have them. So I do think there is that opportunity, but there can be improvements made to those processes.
This issue with the ambiguity of the DIA analyst role roles at CENTCOM seems to be one of the specific examples you cite as a real issue here. Can you just give us an example or a little bit more clarity into exactly how that played out?
It played out by some of the analysts not knowing what analytical standards applied to them, whether ICD 203, 206, 208 applied to them, not knowing who exactly they worked for, not knowing various operating procedures and what their reports were and what the intent of their reports were. I think it needs to be clarified exactly what kind of training they receive, who they're working for, what kind of certifications they need to have, and what their exact relationship is to the combatant command as well to DIA. We found some ambiguity about that, not only among the analysts, but the senior leaders we talked to as well, not even knowing for sure whether the intelligence community directives applied to them. So that's concerning to us, and there needs to be more clarity in writing and documented, including the standard operating procedures that they have. That needs to be clarified.
So there clearly are some process improvements that need to be made, but part of this is also just command climate. Have you, and you address that in your report as well, has the IG received any similar complaints of command climate issue or poor process issues at other COCOM J2s?
I can't say whether we've never received any other complaints, but we've never received anything like this in terms of the intensity and the number and the concern that we've had. So this was unusual. It was very unusual.
And Mr. Fine, my final question is, do you have any plans to share the recommendations of your findings with other COCOM J2s so that this kind of thing does not happen elsewhere in the future?
Well, we have made the recommendations known, publicly released them, gave them to the department, gave them to the DIA. I think the DIA, as well as the department itself, ought to make sure that others are aware of this, and they can provide, as I said in my opening statement, a useful roadmap for others as well. I think that's one of the important things that needs to be done, not solely for focusing on CENTCOM, but have others look at this as well to see whether there are process improvements that they need to make in other combatant commands as well as throughout the DOD and the DIA.
Thank you again for your work.
Thank you very much. We are voting right now, so we're getting ready to recess here. But based on the former conversation, just want to let everybody know there is a second panel, and we do have representatives of the DIA and CENTCOM and the Office of the Undersecretary of the Defense, Intelligence, and the Joint Staff that will be testifying next. So I hope everyone will be able to come back and we'll finish our questioning with Mr. Fine, but then we'll get their response as well. So I call this recess until after votes. Thank you. Thank you. We will reconvene. We appreciate your patience while we were voting, but thank you very much for waiting. I know there may be some other members here, but I did have another question for you before our second panel. In your opening statement, you said that you did find that they distorted the projects, that they didn't falsify, but you used the word that they distorted. Or did I misunderstand you?
Yeah, we found that they did not systematically distort or intentionally distort the products or suppress or delay. We did find a perception of that, and we found processes that needed improvement, but we did not find systematic or intentional distortion.
And when you were conducting this investigation, where did the burden of proof lie? Did the CENTCOM leadership need to show they didn't manipulate the intelligence, or did the whistleblowers need to show the CENTCOM leadership did manipulate it?
We didn't have a burden of proof. We didn't apply that burden of proof. We just wanted to see what the facts showed and what the evidence showed, and then we reached our conclusions based upon that. So if we would have found that there was distortion, we would have said that, but we didn't find that. So we tried to do a thorough and objective review and come to the conclusions that we thought were warranted.
Okay, very good. Do you have any further questions, Mr. Moulton?
No, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, I think there were some members that had some questions, but they're not back yet, and we've had our second panel waiting very long. So I think we will conclude this first section. But thank you very much, Mr. Fine, for your fine work, no pun intended. And we look forward to following up with you and seeing what you find in the future as far as how well the departments follow your recommendations. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to welcome our second panel, and thank you for your patience in waiting. We very much appreciate your involvement in our hearing and look forward to hearing what you have to share. For our second panel, we have Major General James Mars. He's Director of Intelligence for the Joint Staff. Major General Mark Quantock, Director of Intelligence for U.S. Central Command. Mr. Jacques Grimes, Director of Defense Analysis for the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And Mr. Neil Wiley, Director of Analysis for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So I understand the Department of Defense has submitted a single written statement, but I will turn to each of you for any open remarks that you wish to make. So, Major General Mars.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to offer testimony on the Department of Defense Inspector General Report, Investigation on Allegations Relating to U.S. CENTCOM Intelligence Products. I'm pleased to be here today with my other colleagues at the table to share my perspective, both as a producer of intelligence and as a representative of the Combatant Command J2s. Other than CENTCOM, of course, who is most ably represented by Major General Mark Quantock to my left. I echo my colleagues' sentiments, and you'll hear more of that shortly, regarding the important work done by the DOD IG and the House Joint Task Force. Both reports remind us of the vital and complex responsibilities entrusted to intelligence professionals within our joint force. Continual improvements in analytic standards and processes are necessary to ensure intelligence products continue to be of the highest quality, objectivity, and integrity. Let me comment first on the Joint Staff J2, a unique team that is both part of the Joint Staff and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Our J2 mission is to provide the Chairman, the Secretary of Defense, and senior joint force leadership with decision quality intelligence that is relevant, accurate, and unbiased. Doing that work well depends on a high-quality team of intelligence professionals, and within the context of today's hearing, emphasis on two key ingredients. First is a workforce steeped in the elements of good analytic tradecraft. The programs and processes that will be outlined by Mr. Grimes and Mr. Wiley serve as the foundation of that tradecraft. We build upon that in the Joint Staff J2 with our own local training and collaborative relationships to ensure the best application to our mission. The second ingredient is the responsibility I and my leadership team have every day to create an environment where even in the most pressure-packed situations, dissent and candor are encouraged as we shape our intelligence assessments. While I, as the J2, am ultimately responsible for the quality of those assessments, this is a team sport of the highest stakes for our national security, and one that only works at its best when communication and collaboration are strong. As for my J2 colleagues across the combatant commands, they and their teams face a very similar mission and set of challenges as they support their 4-star commanders and combatant command joint force. They are very aware of today's hearing and the important work done by the DOD IG and the House Joint Task Force, and are looking at this as a near-term opportunity to focus on the aspects of our tradecraft and operating environment that are vital to mission success. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General Quantock.
Yes, ma'am. Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation.
Is your
to offer-
microphone on? Excuse me. Is your microphone on?
Yes, it is. Okay now, I'm sorry. Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the committee, thank you very much for the invitation to offer testimony on the IG report. First, I would like to acknowledge the breadth of the investigation and appreciate the efforts of both the IG and the Joint Task Force on CENTCOM intelligence analysis. The IG report provided thoughtful recommendations on ways to make improvements within the command, and we are taking those on, as well as those from the Joint Task Force. Of the 29 DOD IG recommendations and the 4 from the JTF report, I view CENTCOM J2, and that would be me, as the lead for implementation, certainly for CENTCOM. We have developed an aggressive action plan, which we are currently executing. To be clear, some of these actions are new initiatives, but many are actions that have already been implemented. Indeed, were implemented many months ago. But as with any action that involves leadership, communications, or training, the initial implementation is the easy part. Sustainment over time is the real challenge, a challenge that we readily accept at CENTCOM. We look forward to working with USDI and DIA in developing and implementing tradecraft and production standards to ensure our commanders and the nation's policymakers receive the very best intelligence support. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Mr. Grimes.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to offer the testimony of the Department of Defense on the Inspector General Report, Investigation on Allegations Relating to U.S. CENTCOM Products. I am Jacques Grimes, Director of Defense Analysis and Partner Engagement, and I represent the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. My role is to oversee defense analysis and to set a policy foundation that empowers defense analytic components to produce high-quality, relevant, effective analysis. The Department is indeed impressed with the Inspector General's investigation, and we appreciate the opportunity that it gives us to discuss the steps we are taking to improve intelligence analysis across the defense intelligence enterprise. We in the Department hold ourselves to the highest standards, and we take great pride in the exceptional intelligence professionals who support the full spectrum of DOD intelligence customers, from the President of the United States to the soldier in the field. Every day, thousands of our intelligence professionals across the globe tirelessly provide insight and analysis without politicization. Our commitment is and always will be to provide unvarnished intelligence and key assessments into the myriad of challenges facing our country every day. But we recognize that we can be better, and we are getting better We are studying the Inspector General's recommendations closely, and we are identifying specific actions that we can take now to address them. We will use the recommendations in concert with our already ongoing actions to build a strong foundation for high-quality, objective defense intelligence analysis. For example, in November 2016, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence signed out a new policy titled Management and Oversight of DOD All-Source Analysis, which assigns the role of the functional manager for DOD All-Source Analysis to the Defense Intelligence Agency and extends intelligence community analytic standards to all DOD intelligence analytic organizations, including the combatant commands. I co-chair, along with my colleague from the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Defense Analytic Tradecraft Council, which serves as a forum for advancing analytic integrity and tradecraft standards across the defense intelligence enterprise. The Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence also sponsored the first ever Analytic Objectivity Symposium in September 2016 that brought together expert speakers from academia, finance, accounting, medical research, and law enforcement to discuss measures for reducing bias and politicization in analysis. While these steps were initiated without specific reference to the Inspector General's investigation at CENTCOM, they align with many of the IG's recommendations. The steps we're taking have already established a firm foundation for DOD intelligence analysis. We very much look forward to continuing along this path to ensure that DOD analysis meets the highest standards of quality, objectivity, and integrity.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Wiley?
Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Moulton, and members of the committee, I would like to join my colleagues in thanking you for the invitation to offer testimony on the DOD IG report. As the DIA Director for Analysis and the DOD Functional Manager for All Source Analysis, I'm responsible for the alignment, quality, and integrity of the analytic output at DIA, the Service Intelligence Centers, and the combatant commands. We appreciate the DOD IG's thorough investigation and note that the investigation found no lack of integrity or lack of probity in the intelligence process. We in the analytic profession hold ourselves to a high standard, and when concerns are raised, it makes us all examine what we could do better going forward. At DIA, across the Defense All-Source Analysis enterprise, and in partnership with USDI, we've been aggressively investing in initiatives to strengthen analytic tradecraft and analytic processes. While many of these efforts were initiated independently from and prior to the IG report, they align well with many of the recommendations contained therein. We have established the Defense Analytic Tradecraft Council to coordinate and implement analytic tradecraft and process improvements across the enterprise. Most noteworthy thus far have been the implementation of an enterprise-wide analytic ombudsman program and a common process for analytic product evaluations. We have expanded professional and analyst career education through the addition of a 10-day course for DIA analysts, offered both in the National Capital Region and at the combatant commands, stressing and exercising Intelligence Community Directive 203 tradecraft standards and analytic design. We also believe that rigorous certification is an essential component of a professional workforce and continue to implement and enhance the Certified Defense All-Source Analysis program to demonstrate attainment in analytic competence. We have already made considerable strides in implementing common analytic standards and practices across the enterprise, but the business of intelligence analysis is one of constant improvement. With our partners in USDI and across the enterprise, we will continue to develop, codify, and share best practices in intelligence tradecraft, process, and training. Our ultimate mission is to provide our warfighters and policymakers with defense all-source analysis of the highest insight, quality, and integrity. They deserve no less. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm encouraged by your testimony. It sounds like already that you've made a lot of changes, and it could be defense-wide. The lessons learned from this incident. You talk about Mr. Wiley, analytic ombudsman, common analytic standards for intelligence all across the DOD, career education. Mr. Grimes, you talked about the development of a council standards, defense analytics, and a symposium that was held where experts looked at ways to measure. So I'm very encouraged by this. And General Quantock, my question is that the Inspector General identified several issues having to do with poor work environment and climate at CENTCOM during a crisis period. So can you describe the specific actions that have been taken to improve the common climate at CENTCOM?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. We have endeavored over the past really 18 months to continue to improve the climate specifically in the CENTCOM J2. And I think just in terms of the numbers, that has bared out. So in the IG investigation, it was and the way we have monitored this is through the use of several surveys. So the one that was called out in the IG report was the Analytic Integrity and Standard Survey, which did have an anomalous in 15 percentage. It was much higher than other COCOMs. Since that time, and we've just received the 16 FY or calendar year 16, where it went from a 41% essentially dissatisfaction down to 22%. That is an enormous increase. And when you look at that, you contrast that, and so in 15 it was 41%, and then compared to a combatant command average of 23%. This past year, it has gone down to 22% as opposed to 25% for the COCOM average. So we're actually under the COCOM average, which is a pretty marked increase, and that's really through a lot of programs that we've instituted. And this was really actually well before I got there and General Votel got there. So when it was recognized by the previous J2 command team that there were challenges, they did start to institute things like town halls and interfacing with the analyst, and we have certainly continued that. So to be very specific, some of the things that are not new that they instituted that got the ball moving in the right direction were monthly town halls. We have what's called a daily IFC or Intel Fusion Center closeout, where the J2 or the Vice J2 sits with all the analysts that are working the problems. It's usually anywhere between 25 and 50 of them. And we have a discussion of what's occurred that day in the fights that we have at CENTCOM. Our Vice J2 has normal office hours where he'll take a couple times a week, he'll go down to a office in the Vince, which is the location where the bulk of our analysts are, and he'll spend an hour and a half there and just interfacing with analysts or anyone in the J2 that has an issue they want to talk to or bend the J2's ear on. We've had an open door policy for some time. And the command climate that we also work very hard on and General Votel has been an enormous advocate for this, is he spends a lot of time with our analysts. He receives intelligence first thing in the morning through his read book, and what I'll send in with that read book is a young analyst, and so it's a one-on-one between a 4-star and a young analyst, and they get to answer the questions, and they do a magnificent job. I will tell you, I'm very proud of the workforce that we have. They are magnificent professionals. And when he has a question, they'll take that back to the JIOC and to the JIC, and they'll work that question, and then it'll be an email from that young analyst to the 4-star. And those of us on the chain of command also get CC'd, so we know what the boss knows. But that's been very, very positive. What is new in terms of since the new team has rolled in is we do. It's normal leadership things where you've got outreach to the full team, not just the analysts, but the full J2 team, which is biweekly. I'll put out an update to the team in terms of what's kind of happening within the command. We have the CENTCOM Commander General Votel has daily addresses over the PA system where he tells about his travels and what's going on within the command. Very, very well received by the command. We've introduced walkabouts where I'll just, frankly, just do normal leadership stuff of getting out there and mixing it up with our troops. I learn something every time I do that, and as I mentioned, it is a world-class workforce. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Ranking Member Moulton, do you have some questions?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. This is a question for General Quantock. One of the key findings in the DOD IG's report was that the leadership did not ensure operational reporting was necessarily from commanders on the ground was appropriately separated from analytical assessments. I'm an operational guy myself. I think highly of commanders' views on the ground, but obviously they have a certain place in intelligence analysis. Can you talk about how what you're doing to correct that particular issue?
So I will tell you that in the intelligence field, we need to take all the information in, always. We have to acknowledge that operational information, like other information, has its own biases, and we have to acknowledge that and incorporate that into our assessments. But properly, if we've got, for example, when Mosul fell and before OIR stood up, we had intelligence analysts. The intel guys normally do red; they do the threat, and so we're actually trying to report on friendly forces, and the team was working that. When we started to have friendly forces, U.S. forces, come on the battlefield and start to make assessments about what was going on in the battlefield, we have to take that in. That is right. It's appropriate. It's in accordance with ICD 203. Just the right thing to do. And so we have encouraged the use of all forms of information and intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence, open source intelligence, anything we can get. We just, again, have to weigh and acknowledge that there are biases and be aware of those.
And my understanding is that the issue was not that you weren't incorporating these different sources of intelligence, but that the biases weren't recognized. Is that correct?
Well, I wasn't there at the time in terms of the specifics
Sure.
of what was, how it was characterized. But looking forward, certainly that is one of the things that we are most cognizant of.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have Representative Cheney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you very much, all of you, for your service and for being here today. I wanted to just see if we could get a little more details about the mentions sort of repeatedly about analytic standards and the lack of understanding on the part of some of the analysts about what standards were really applicable to them. And how has that changed, and how has, and specifically, how do the standards themselves, how are they implemented? And then secondly, maybe give a little bit of specifics about the DIA engagement. I know one of the things that we've urged is that the DIA really accept its responsibility as sort of overseer of the whole defense intelligence enterprise. And I'd be interested to know specifically how that's manifesting itself on a day-to-day basis.
If I may take it first, and then I'll hand it over to my teammates. In terms of standards, and because it was brought up, I know in the testimony from the IG, in terms of who do folks work for. I have made it very clear, and I know that the DIA is supporting me on this, and we've had actually a session with other J2s to make sure we're all in alignment with this. But analysts that are from DIA that work in combatant commands work for the combatant commander. They work for the J2. What J2s need to be cognizant of is the requirements that those analysts have for their professional development in terms of training and in terms of their advancement. And they have to make sure that that training and those experiences and exposures that they need are taken into account. And so in my town halls with my folks, I have told them, I said, listen, let's make sure you understand that we work for the combatant command. It is no different, quite frankly, in terms of these loyalties, is to say, hey, do I work for the Army or do I work for the combatant command? Well, the reality is I work for both. But I take my instructions from the tower, and the tower is at MacDill Air Force Base with General Votel. And so, but like every service, I have to be aware of the requirements that the Army has of me, whether it's for firing a weapon or doing PT test or whatever the standards I have to do. So it's really that both world, and that is really, it talks to, what folks have to have. The saying I have with this whole thing is we did not have an intelligence integrity issue. We had communications, leadership, and training issues. That's exactly what the IG found in their 29 recommendations, and that's exactly what we're getting after. When you part of our action plan, I've gone through it in depth. When you look at those 29 recommendations, you can put a training, a leadership, or a communications issue by every one of those recommendations. And so I acknowledge that, and we're getting after that, ma'am.
So if I may take the questions on DIA and commonality and standards. So intelligence community directive analytic standards do apply to combatant commands. That was reinforced recently by an Undersecretary of Defense instruction in November that establishes that ICD standards do apply across the defense all-source analytic enterprise. So it is very clear that they do apply at the combatant commands. In terms of DIA's role in all-source analysis in the enterprise, I think I would characterize it in that we are interested in consistency, integrity, and probity of the analytic process, rather than interested in the actual analytic outcome. So in other words, the analytic line taken by the elements within the enterprise are the responsibility of the elements within the enterprise, the combatant command JIOCs, the service intelligence centers, the elements within DIA. The process by which they arrive at that analysis needs to have integrity, and we get that through common standards, common practices, and common execution. So with USDI and the rest of the enterprise, what we are focusing on now is establishing that common understanding of what standards are, what tradecraft practices are, and what the institutions and mechanisms for doing that are. So we mentioned earlier the Defense Analytic Tradecraft Council. So that's the principal vehicle to bring all 16 members of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise together to discuss tradecraft standards, establish consistent tradecraft standards, and then communicate those tradecraft standards. We also use that as the vehicle for establishing the ombudsman and the product review process.
Let me just ask, so is that a process that has just begun now as a result of what's happened and as a result of these reports? And was it the case that there wasn't sort of a consistent set of standards previously?
Yes. The Defense Analytic Tradecraft Council was revitalized. It was established some years back, but it had essentially lain dormant. So it was revitalized as a result of this situation, and we reestablished it to invigorate commonality and standards. And again, that's what we recognized was necessary, was a vehicle to achieve greater consistency across the enterprise.
I just want to add perhaps the chapeau, if you will, of the USDI's role in all of this. We develop policy, we conduct oversight, and we are advocates for defense analysis programs to include playing an integrator function across the defense intelligence enterprise. We have laid out 4 basic actions that we've taken already. First, the oversight and management of DOD all-source analysis in a DOD instruction that applies to the entire defense intelligence enterprise and lays out the role of the functional manager for analysis, calls for board of governors, a governance, if you will, structure for the defense intelligence enterprise. And we have 3 memos that the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence put out to the enterprise, laying out 6 functional areas that are critical to defense analysis. And then finally, an all-source analysis certification program for certified analysts and how they can become certified across the enterprise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And I'm very encouraged by the testimony that we received today. You clearly have taken this report very seriously and taken a lot of positive steps that'll benefit not only CENTCOM, but it sounds like across the entire all of the combatant commanders. And so this committee is dedicated to making sure that our warfighter has the best intelligence possible and the most positive environment possible for those who are committing their lives to this very important mission. So we look forward to working with the Inspector General as he continues to follow up with you in the months ahead, but keep up the great work. We appreciate what you're doing, and this hearing is now adjourned.